Hey, this is RJ, and welcome back to the RJTalksPrem Podcast. Today we're going to be looking back at some of the most important results from Game Week 2, and also trying to predict out Game Week 3. And just as a heads up, it's going to be a shorter podcast this week, just because I also released my Premier League predictions as a separate video earlier in the week. But that took up some of the time I had allocated for this podcast, which might also result in this podcast coming out a day or two late. Moving forward, ideally I'd have those out Tuesday or Wednesday morning, but that just wasn't possible this week. But if you haven't seen my Premier League predictions video, go check it out. I promise it's worth the extra delay in this podcast. We went over my final league predictions, domestic cup winners, some individual awards, things of that nature. So go check that out. Let me know what you agree with. Let me know what you think I'm totally wrong about, and just give me your opinions on that. But let's not delay this podcast any more than I already have. Let's just get straight into it. This is RJ Talks Prem, Game Week 2. Enjoy. So, as I mentioned, today's podcast is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. So, I'm only going to be talking about a few select games from this past week, which will be the ones marked on your screen now. But before I get into those, I want to give a general recap of the scores from this week and what happened across the league, and then I'll take a deeper dive into some of these games. So, starting off with the Saturday games, Brighton were able to see a 2-1 win out at home against Manchester United, thanks to João Pedro's late game winner in a game that we'll be getting into in a little bit more detail just coming up shortly. Crystal Palace were defeated 2-0 against West Ham in a close-fought battle that probably could have gone either way on a different day. Fulham were able to pick up their first 3 points of the season at home against Leicester City in a game that saw previous Arsenal player Emile Smith-Rowe's first goal of the season. Manchester City, to no one's surprise probably, soundly defeated Ipswich Town 4-1 at the Etihad in a game where City actually trailed 1-0 after 7 minutes. Southampton were defeated 1-0 at home by Nottingham Forest thanks to a 70th minute eventual game winner from Morgan Gibbs-White. Tottenham absolutely pummeled Everton in a 4-0 smackdown that got the Spurs their first win of the 2024 season. Arsenal took down Villa 2-0 at Villa Park in a game that scoreline maybe didn't reflect the flow of the game, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. And now moving on to Sunday's game, Bournemouth were able to split a point with Newcastle at the Vitality Stadium in a game that probably could have seen all 3 points going to Bournemouth on a different day. Chelsea crushed Wolves in a high-scoring 6-2 spectacle that takes the crown as the most entertaining game of the week, with Noni Madueke scoring a hat-trick and Cole Palmer having 4 goal contributions. And then for the final game of the week, Liverpool was able to take down Brentford in another comfortable 2-0 win, this one at Anfield, where Liverpool can start out the season on 6 points under their new coach, Arne Slot. Okay, now let's take a bit of a deeper look into a few of these games and talk about some of the key highlights from this week. Alright, now let's take a deeper look at the first game I've highlighted for this week, which was the first game played this week, Brighton playing at home to Manchester United. And United, for the second week in a row now, are playing the week opener, but this one did not go as well for them as the last one did. And if you remember, I'm a United fan, so this game really hurt my heart. Brighton ended up winning this game 2-1 thanks to a last-minute winner by João Pedro. He scored an unmarked header at the back post. It was just a complete mental lapse for Manchester United. It seemed like there was 1, 2, or even 3 people that could have scored the goal if João Pedro didn't, just completely leaving that back post unmarked following a corner. And it was a mistake that ultimately cost them 3 points in the end. Earlier goals in this game came from Welbeck in the 32nd minute, and then Amad Diallo equalizing in the 60th minute. And following the Ahmad goal, United thought they had grabbed the lead after Garnacho seemed like he had scored in the 72nd minute, but it turned out that the new signing Xerxes, who was in an offside position, had actually touched the ball a fraction of a second before it went over the line, and the goal was disallowed. Just such a shame. And then in typical heartbreaking Manchester United fashion, they would go on to concede that late goal and drop 3 points here. And this is exactly what I was talking about in my Week 1 podcast and my Premier League predictions video, which, again, if you haven't seen, please go check out. But this is exactly what I was talking about when I said United are going to be such a hard team to determine where they're going to finish this season. And it's not only on the broader scale of where they're going to finish on the season. It's so week to week in the sense that you don't know how they're going to do next week against any opponent. You don't know how they're going to do in the next half following halftime. They're just a team that's all over the place with lots of ups and downs, and they're really struggling to find consistency in the way that they play. But from a Brighton point of view, I mean, Brighton will be extremely happy with this result. This result will put them on 6 points after 2 games, and you really couldn't ask for a better start if you're them, especially considering they have a 31-year-old head coach. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. That's almost unheard of, especially with how hot he's hit the ground running. He's older than a lot of the players on the team, he's younger than a lot of players on the team, which I'm sure is kind of a weird dynamic in the dressing room, but, they're making it work. So more power to them, and they'll be hoping to keep this form up long term and push for that European spot that they have their eyes set on. And whether that's top 4 or top 6, they'll be pushing for it this season. And I want to loop back around on something we talked about last week on the podcast. We talked about United's press and how effective it was versus Fulham. And I wasn't necessarily sure if that was United's press looking really good, or if Fulham were just really poor at playing out from the back, or maybe a combination of the two of them. But I think we got a little bit of clarity on that situation this week. United tried to do something similar this week against Brighton, but Brighton notoriously are a much more fluid team playing out from the back. And I don't want to say United's press looked bad, because it didn't, but it just looked okay. It didn't look nearly as threatening as it did against Fulham, where it looked like they had developed something that could really push them through the season. It's clear what Ten Hag is trying to do. He's trying to play a direct, fluid counterattack like what you saw with Liverpool under Klopp, but we'll have to see how that pans out for the rest of the season, because it's not fully clicking so far. It did against that Fulham game, kind of, and it sort of clicked in this Brighton game, but it's a little boring to watch as well, and whether that's his fault or if the players that he has just can't implement his system in the way that he wants them to, that's another story, but we'll have to see what happens going forward in the season. And the last talking point I want to talk about in this game is Marcus Rashford. And I don't want to bring up Rashford in a negative context, because I know a lot of people are doing that, and that's really easy to do, but I just want to say it in a genuine way, and I want to pose the question, where does Rashford fit into this team moving forward? He's not going to want to be on the bench moving forward, but it's looking like he might be trending there. And it was just 2 years ago where he was absolutely lighting up the league. He had so much energy, and he was seemingly putting the ball in the back of the net every single week. And we haven't seen anything close to that this year or last year. And you can just see it in his game. He's not putting in nearly enough effort, in my opinion. He's been lurking offside when we gain possession and just killing the attack. And then when he does get those chances, he's struggling to finish them. He just doesn't look like himself, or himself from 2 years ago at least. And he's currently starting over Garnacho. And Garnacho has come off the bench and made a serious impact in both of United's games so far. Against Fulham, he picked up that assist off the cross to Xerxes. And then in this game against Brighton, he came off the bench and he scored that offside goal, which, wasn't his fault. Xerxes touched it right before it went in, and on a different day, that should count, and United would have grabbed the lead right there. So Garnacho's going to have to start moving forward. And then there's Ahmad on the other side. And Ahmad was scoring goals in the preseason where Rashford wasn't. And then, again, this game, he found the back of the net. And, it's a long season. Form can change throughout the season, but Rashford's going to have to figure out what he can do to keep his spot in this United team. He's been at United his whole career, and for the most part, he's played for the first team his whole career. But now his position's in serious jeopardy, and it's coming from the likes of a 22-year-old in Ahmad and a 20-year-old in Garnacho, and Rashford's 26 going on 27. So he'll be wanting to kickstart things moving forward. He's going to really need to try to rejuvenate his career. And he would have hoped in these first 2 games to really kickstart the season and start off on a positive note. But, in this game, it wasn't Rashford who kicked their season off. It was Brighton. And Brighton grabbed the 3 points here, and they grabbed a great result. Next, I want to talk quickly about Man City playing at home to Ipswich, where they grabbed the expected win, winning 4-1. And last week, I talked about how Ipswich started off very well against Liverpool, where they held them to 0 shots on target at halftime. And Ipswich, in this game, against a tough Man City side, got a good start to the game again. And they actually started off with a 1-0 lead in the 7th minute. But that obviously didn't last too long. They ended up giving a penalty away in the 12th minute, which, usually results in a goal when Haaland is on the other end of it. And then if you blinked for too long, you might have missed the next 2 goals. And it was De Bruyne in the 14th minute to make it 2-1, and then Haaland again in the 16th minute to make it 3-1, which, essentially crushed Ipswich's dreams of a shock result here. And then towards the end of the game, Haaland would go on to grab a 3rd goal to complete his hat-trick in the 88th minute, where he scored a, unorthodox goal, scoring outside the box, where he just perfectly placed it into the bottom corner to make it 4-1 City. And I feel really bad for Ipswich. They got promoted to the Prem for the first time in over 20 years, and they're immediately faced with Week 1 Liverpool, Week 2 City. And because of those 2 initial tough matchups, I still don't think there's much you can take away from how they're going to try to play this season or how well they might play this season. You're not going to be able to play the way you want against the likes of Liverpool and City, especially as a newly promoted team. You're going against these powerhouses, and you're really just trying to stick out the games and try to squeak maybe a draw out of those 2 games, which obviously they were unable to do. But I think when they start playing some lower table teams, we'll really be able to analyze how they're going to approach the season. But not too much I can take away from them yet. And my dad texted me after Ipswich scored their first goal, and he said something along the lines of, "Do you think Ipswich might have scored too early?" And I think that might have contributed to the entourage of goals City scored immediately after conceding. Because on one hand, you kind of poke the bear in City, so to speak, where they'll probably step it up a notch, where they're like, wow, this is serious. Now we need to score 2 to win this game, which they obviously quickly did. But maybe they just start trying a little bit harder. And then on the other hand, I think Ipswich might have felt obligated to try to sit back and protect their lead and just try to see out a 1-0 or a 1-1, which, against a team like Man City is almost never going to work out. But whether they scored early or late in this game, it was always going to be a lot to ask of Kieran McKenna and his men to travel to the Etihad and get a result. So, rough night for them, but not too much you can take away. And good result from City, and they'll be confident with that moving forward. So, moving over to another dominant result from this week, Tottenham faced Everton at home and absolutely cruised their way to a 4-0 win. If you watch my Premier League predictions video, I picked Tottenham to finish within the top 4, and I think I kind of boldly predicted at the time Everton to get relegated this season, and this result kind of helped confirm my decisions. Goals in this game came from Basuma, Romero, and then Son, who grabbed 2, and this was a great bounce-back win for Tottenham. Obviously, last week they drew 1-1 to Leicester in a game that they probably should have won, and I think they just needed to readjust, calm down, and set the tone in this game at home in front of their fans. And they did just that. And they showed that when they're clicking, they can be great on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. And I know it was just Everton that they did it against, so I don't want to get carried away, and I don't want to take too much away from this game. But, from a Spurs perspective, it's still extremely promising and exciting, for Spurs and Big Ange. But on the other hand, Everton are just off to a horrendous start. It was a sloppy 3-0, loss against Brighton last week. And then in a game where they would have hoped to, regain some momentum and change the tone, it somehow got even worse with the 4-0 loss to Tottenham. So yeah, in my opinion, Sean Dyche, the Everton coach, he's really going to need to get things rolling for the Toffees soon. Otherwise, his job might be at stake. And if you watch my Premier League predictions video, maybe I should have taken Sean Dyche as the first manager to be sacked. But I did not, so go check out who I did pick. But yeah, great result from Tottenham here. And towards the end of the game, they were even able to give some valuable time to some of their youngsters in Bergvall and Archie Gray. And they even had another youngster, Odo Bear from Burnley, start the game. So it was really cool to see them play. Future prospects for for Tottenham. And Tottenham will be looking to carry over some of this momentum into future weeks. And Everton, on the other hand, will probably want to try to do their best Men in Black impression and erase these first 2 weeks of the Premier League season out of their memory. So next we're going to take a look into Villa taking on Arsenal at home, where Arsenal came on top with a 2-0 win. This is a huge win for Arsenal. They'll be ecstatic that they could travel to Villa Park and pick up 3 points to put them on that maximum of 6 points so far for the season. The last thing Arsenal would want right now is to lose out on points early and trail City again and get another from-behind race against City, because we know how those have historically turned out. And I know it's a little early to be talking about points races, but these are the types of games that can make the difference in the long run. These are the types of games that you look back on and you say, ooh, if they didn't drop those points early on in the season, they could have been contending for it at the end. So while, yeah, it is early to be talking about points races and results kind of in that way, it's not too early, especially when a team is going to be pushing for the title. And they'll need to keep up this momentum throughout the season in the same way. They should treat every game like that. And they have so far, and they've picked up the maximum amount of points. This scoreline maybe isn't fair to Villa in this game. Ollie Watkins failed to put a pretty easy chance on target in the first half, just rolled it wide of the goal. And then in the second half, David Raya came up with some absolutely ridiculous saves against Morgan Rogers. And if those 2 goals, are converted, well, then Villa walk away with a point in a 2-2 draw. But those are just what-ifs, And what-ifs don't get you on the score sheet, and what-ifs don't win you games. And at the end of the day, it was Arsenal who are more clinical with their chances, and it'll be Arsenal who go back home with 3 points. But on a side note, Morgan Rogers is going to be one to watch out for this season, the striker for Aston Villa. He looked great, and I'd expect him to start converting some chances in the near future, open his account for the season. He's only 22 years old, so he's young and developing, and that's definitely a positive that Villa can take away from this game. And then from a more general point of view on this game for Villa, I don't think there's any need to overreact at a result like this. You had some promising moments. You could have gotten a result on a different day, possibly gotten a point here. And that's something that not a lot of teams are going to be able to say this season when they play Arsenal. So they should be able to hold their heads high, but it should be Arsenal who are holding them even higher. And the last game I want to talk about this week is going to be Wolves playing against Chelsea at the Molineux. This game was so fun to watch from a neutral's point of view. The game was wide open. The first half of the game reminded me of kind of like the NBA All-Star game, if you've ever watched it, where both teams are just walking down the court and scoring points. It seems like that. Both teams were just easily finding their way to get a shot off at the other side. Both teams looked like they could have scored a goal every few minutes, and it was just crazy. It was 2-2 at halftime, but the game felt like it could have been 4-4 at that time. And things only took off from there. And I remember I was watching this game with my girlfriend, and I remember saying how the game was going to become much more compact in the second half. That's typically what happens. Coaches go back to the dressing room, they make changes, they look for ways to shut their opponents down, they switch up their initial tactics. Yeah, that's not what happened at all. It looked like only one side got the coach's memo at halftime, and that side was Chelsea, who added 4 more goals to their tally in the second half, and they would go on to win this game 6-2. Goals in this game came from Nico Jackson, Cole Palmer, who also had a hat-trick of assists in the game, Noni Madueke, who had a hat-trick of goals in the game, which I'm going to talk about in a second here. Funny story with that one. And then the new signing, or I guess kind of return signing, João Felix subbed on and added a 6th for Chelsea. So before I get into this game, I want to talk about the Noni Madueke hat-trick. So if you didn't see it, he accidentally put something out on social media before the game It was meant to only be seen by a few of his friends, but it ended up getting shared to the general public, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put it on the screen now. But it was a post that read, "Everything about this place is crap," I'll say. And he tagged Wolverhampton as the location. And he was very apologetic about the post. I don't think he actually meant any harm by it, or he didn't mean to, offend anybody or make anybody angry, but kind of rightly so because of this. He got booed by the Wolves fans every single time he touched the ball in the game, and it was loud. I mean, you could hear it booming through the TV. It was so loud, but he took it on the chest, and he backed up his talk in one of the coolest ways possible by scoring his first ever Premier League hat trick in front of everyone who wanted him to fail. So that was just a really cool moment. It's definitely going to go down as one of the moments of the season. But all right, let's get into the actual game. So I said last week how I wasn't going to judge Chelsea based on their 2-0 loss to City, and I think in hindsight that was the right choice. Like I said, when teams play City, they don't play like themselves. And I think that this was a game where Enzo Maresca could really start to implement his tactics, and we get to see more of what we could expect from Chelsea in this game moving forward. Their offense looked really free-flowing in this game. All of their attackers were seemingly on the same page. They were moving down the field as a unit. They were finding each other with passes, and they were finding ways to put the ball in the back of the net, 6 times. And the defense and the goalkeeper for Chelsea, on the other hand, looked a little questionable at times. But I think Chelsea fans might be okay with that. The team was so fun to watch in this game just because of their brilliant offense. And that's something that Chelsea fans haven't been able to say for a while. At least, last season, maybe at the beginning, towards the end, I know they started to figure out a little bit. But yeah, this is something to be really excited about if you're a Chelsea fan. Really fun game. But on the other hand, Wolves looked absolutely horrendous in this game. Their defense and midfield looked wide open. They were making tons of mistakes throughout the game. And they almost looked like they didn't want to be there after going down in the second half, which to an extent I understand because you're getting pummeled in the game and you know that you're probably not going to come back. The momentum's against you, but you can't just stop trying and let your head drop and just continue to concede goals. And that's the difference. Good teams in this league, when they go down, the players on the team get more motivated. They feel the need to come back more. Just look at Man City this week. They go down 1-0 in the 7th minute, and then they score 3 goals in a 6-minute window because the players understand that this is unacceptable and they need to come back even harder. Just looking at Wolves, they look terrible, and possibly the most concerning thing besides the 6-2 scoreline is the lack of resilience they showed. It's not a good sign moving forward if things continue to go south. And they sit on 0 points after 2 games now, and they have a -6 goal differential. They did play Arsenal and Chelsea, to be fair, which are very tough games, but just taking those 2 games as a sample for the rest of the season, it's a seemingly very bleak outlook for Wolves, and they'll be hoping to turn things around soon. So moving on to the predictions side of things here, I'm actually going to be changing up how I do this a little bit. It's going to become a contest now. I'm having my girlfriend submit picks as well, and we're going to be competing against each other here. We're going to each get a point if we pick the correct team each week, and 2 points if we correctly pick a draw. I'm going to have her picks up on the screen. They're pretty similar to mine for this first week, which is actually week 3, but we're not going to add any points from weeks 1 and 2, obviously. So let me just get into my picks here. So the first game of the week is going to be Arsenal at home to Brighton. Yeah, I'm going to have to go Arsenal here. They just looked really good in their first 2 games. Brighton also looking good, so I could see this one being a draw potentially, but the fact that Arsenal's at home probably pushes them over the edge for me. So I'll go with Arsenal here. I have Brentford at home to Southampton. Southampton just looks really poor. Brentford probably not looking great either. Loss of Ivan Toney probably not helping them. But with that said, give me Brentford regardless at home. The next game we have Everton at home to Bournemouth. Don't want the home team here, unlike before. So Everton looking horrible in their first two games. Um, Probably looking like one of the worst teams in the league, at least just to start off the season. Bournemouth actually looking like a pretty competent side, picking up a draw against Newcastle in the last game. So I'll take Bournemouth away here. Next we have Ipswich at home to Fulham. I'm going to go with a draw on this one. Fulham not looking great so far. I know they squeaked out that 2-1 win against Leicester last week. They lost 1-0 to United the week before. And I know Ipswich has kind of gotten defeated pretty soundly in their first two games with that Liverpool and Man City. But again, that's Liverpool and Man City. So I think Ipswich playing at home, they'll have something to prove. And I think Fulham is a team that they might be able to do a little bit of work against. So I'll go with a draw on this one. Next is Leicester at home to Aston Villa. I'm going to go with Villa away here. I think that's a pretty safe pick. I know they lost to Arsenal last week, but they still look like a good team. They still are a good team. Leicester, on the other hand, look like a team who could possibly be going down, but they're going to be in a fight either way. But yeah, I'll go with Villa away here. I think it's pretty comfortable. Forest at home to Wolves. Forest, another one of those teams like Leicester, maybe a step above, but probably going to be in and around the relegation area, just above it probably, and Wolves with just a horrendous start to the season as well. But I'm going to go with a draw here. I think both these teams are on similar levels. Normally I'd probably say Wolves are a step above, but with the way that they started the season, I don't know if I can say that. So I think they're about equal here, and I'll go with the draw. West Ham at home to City. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Man City here, and I don't think I have to explain that one very much. Now moving on to the Sunday games, we have Chelsea at home to Crystal Palace. I said I wasn't going to start picking Chelsea until they gave me a reason to pick them last week, and they proved that, with that big 6-2 win. Their offense looked great. They gave me a reason to pick them, so I'm going to pick them. I'm going to go with the Chelsea home win here. Newcastle home to Spurs. This is going to be a great game. Newcastle, maybe not the start they would have hoped for. A little lackluster, but they're still a great side. Spurs, very good start, and they are a good side as well. Both teams are going to be pushing for Europe this year, but in this game, I'm going to take Spurs away. I just think Spurs, after that 4-0 win, they're going to have momentum. I think they should be able to travel to Newcastle and get the job done. And the final game of the week, United at home against Liverpool. Liverpool traveling to Old Trafford, and United not looking incredible for the first two games. Liverpool looking pretty solid, and as much as it pains me, I'm probably going to have to go with Liverpool here. So, again, you can compare my picks to my girlfriend's. They should both be on the screen now. And we'll see how this turns out next week. All right, and I guess I forgot to mention this in the introduction, but in addition to keeping track of points for predictions for teams throughout the league here, my girlfriend Caitlin and I are also going to be starting another contest where we pick a player every week and keeping track of points based on how well they perform in the league. And the point system is just going to be very simple, just to keep it, nice and simple scoring here. So how it's going to work is it's going to be +1 points for a goal, +1 point for an assist, and plus half a point if it's a goal from a penalty kick. So yeah, we're each going to be picking a player every week and keeping track throughout the season, seeing who has more by the end of the season. We might divvy it up, like restart throughout the year, if a league gets too big or something like that. But for now, that's what we have. An additional rule that's important is you can never pick the same player twice for the rest of the season. So there's 35 weeks left, so there will be 35 different picks. And I guess I'll introduce my pick. So for my pick, I'll be picking Muniz from Fulham, their striker. I know I have a draw on that game with Ipswich and Fulham, but Ipswich defense letting up, 6 goals in the past 2 games. So I'm going to take Fulham, maybe scoring 1 or 2 goals there, and I guess I'm just hoping that's a striker. And from Caitlin's point of view, she will be taking Cole Palmer, trying to ride the wave there. His 4 goal contributions last week, and she'll be hoping that he continues that into this week, where they take on Crystal Palace at home. All right, and then I'm going to be wrapping this podcast up with my parlay of the week. So I'm going to be making some predictions. Last week's parlay hit if you used the draw no bet option. The first two legs hit, and then Newcastle couldn't pull out a win, but they did draw to Bournemouth. So that draw no bet ended up hitting. But here's my parlay for this week. So it's a little less extreme than last week in the sense that it's a little bit less of a payout, but my first leg is going to be Aston Villa money line away to Leicester minus 135. Minus 135, is roughly 50-50 odds, a little bit less on them grabbing a win or not grabbing a win. So I think they should comfortably grab a win here. Leicester by no means have been very competitive in the Premier League so far, and we know Villa can do. And Unai Emery is so smart, and these are points that they're going to want, especially after losing to Arsenal. I think they're going to come out strong, really take this game seriously, and they're going to grab those 3 points. My next leg is going to be Bournemouth plus 0.5 goals away to Everton. So this basically means Bournemouth to not lose to Everton. So Bournemouth to tie or to win. Again, Everton have just looked terrible, conceding so many goals throughout the first 2 games. Bournemouth have actually looked kind of the opposite, better than I would have expected. They look like a really competent side. I think they can go out. And the reason I'm doing plus 0.5 is because I'm pretty sure they're going to grab a win here. But just to play it safe, it's at Everton. Let's just take plus 0.5 where we can. And that's going to be minus 235 as the second leg. And the third leg is going to be in the Arsenal and Brighton game, where I'm going to have the entire game over 2.5 goals. Both these teams know how to score goals. The only thing that would concern me is that Arsenal's defense is so rock solid, but also their attack is so good. So I could definitely see this game being a 2-1 in favor of Arsenal, but I could also see it being, 3-0 or even 3-1, something along those lines. But I'm feeling pretty confident that there will be over 2.5 goals in this game, with both teams loving scoring goals and both teams having great offenses. So that leg comes in at minus 195. You parlay the 3 of those together. The parlay comes out to be plus 275, meaning for every dollar you bet, you'll win 275 profit. And I guess I should also reiterate, please don't take this advice too literally. It's more just a way for me to test my knowledge. I'm very bad at gambling, so I'm only betting $1 on these because I'm very prepared to lose it. But I just wanted to put that out there. So this concludes Game Week 2 for the RJTalksPrem Podcast. Again, I just want to apologize on the delay of getting this out. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be Thursday, I assume. Moving forward in the future, I want to get these out Tuesday or Wednesday, like I had mentioned. But just that Premier League predictions video took up more time than I thought it would have, to be honest. So I had to push this back later into the week. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the podcast. I think the inclusion of, this competition between Caitlin and I on the predictions and the players, it's going to create something special moving forward, and getting other people involved, it's going to be really fun. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody that takes the time to listen to this. It seriously means a lot to me. But yeah, this has been RJ Talks Prem, Game Week 2. Bye.